You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Global Trade This Week. My name is Doug Draper. I am only one of the hosts of this show. That's why we have the banter back and forth. And my good friend, who always seems to be in a hotel somewhere in North America, is Mr. Pete Mento. Pete, what's going on, and where does this podcast find you?
Doug, I am in the positively picturesque burg of Island, New Jersey. It's where our corporate headquarters is. And yeah, it's not the most exciting place to hang out, but it's better than Plymouth, where was I? Michigan. I'm going to give it heads up for that. Yeah.
It's always better than
corporate. Yeah, it's better. It's better. More stuff to do. But I really like going to our corporate office. It's very pretty. It's very nice. I get to see all these people I never get to see that I work with. So I'm looking forward to that. And I have a seminar on Thursday. Get this, Doug. This is crazy. I'm going to put this on LinkedIn. This is my 500th full day trade seminar coming up on Thursday.
Wow. In your whole career. That's crazy.
I've been keeping track. I also keep track of how many speeches I've given and webinars, but just full day trade seminars. This is number 500, which I think it's sad, like that I've been out on the road that much in 24 years doing this.
Yeah. Well, that's impressive. If you had 5, then that means you were doing something wrong. The fact that you have 500 means that you are very talented in global trade. So congratulations, Pete. That's pretty cool.
Well, anybody can be a clown, Doug. Anybody can be a clown. My grandfather always said bad news should be delivered by a pretty woman or a clown. So, bad news and Pete Mento go together that way.
Yeah.
And not because I'm a pretty woman at all. Yeah.
Well, I think we probably have some bad news because we always bring some on the show, but it's all related to global trade. It's all forward thinking, as you and I always try to make happen. And with that, let's just get our first topic on.
Yeah, buddy. So the first topic just happened today, and it's good news for people who import from a lot of places. For quite a while now, for about 4 years, the Generalized System of Preferences, or GSP, has been suspended. And GSP is it's a one-way trade program. So it's not a trade agreement. We don't give the countries on the other side of it preferential treatment. We don't get it for our goods. We give it to them in order to be able to sell things in the United States. And it runs the gamut of all sorts of developing nations. India used to be in it, so is Brazil, but they've gotten big enough where we've popped them out of that. But there's a lot of countries in GSP that really do get a lot out of being a part of this. And its suspension really was because nobody just wanted to push it. But it appears that Congress the Ways and Means is going to take a look at it to see about opening it again. The next questions everyone's going to have is, will it be retroactive? And will I be able to go back, 5 years and try to get some of this money back? I really doubt it. But hey, it's great news all around. They're at least looking at it again. And for a dork like me, I'm excited to see how the process goes. If they add countries, if they subtract countries. So for those of us that do importing and people who are focused on what used to be GSP countries, good news.
Yeah. Well, I guarantee, right, that we make some guarantees around here. Any country that has rare earth minerals or precious metals is going to get that preferential treatment because those are the building blocks of electric vehicles and all the things that we're trying to near shore. So I think that there's going to be some, wait, what country is this? Kind of questions are going to pop out. And you just look at what their preferential treatment is. I think it's going to be related to some of those raw materials to help produce batteries and electric vehicles.
From your mouth to God's ears, anything we can do to make the supply chain more not sustainable, but more resilient, I think sustainable too, but resilient is a great thing. We're far too dependent on a small number of countries for very important things. So I agree, Doug. I hope you're right.
Yeah. Yep. So cool. Well, my first topic is related to domestic transportation and primarily full truckload moves, right? Years ago, to be frank with you, I think it was pre-COVID, and then it was slowly implemented and regulated, the electronic logs, right? Which truckers are out there, back in the Smokey and the Bandit days, they'd have 3 or 4 books and just cook the books. And and try to run 24/7. And then obviously technology came into play and made everything electronic. And you're pushing what service that you're doing as you're driving your truck. Are you on site somewhere? Are you moving? Are you backing up? That kind of stuff in the yard. And it looks like people are finding loopholes in the ELD logs, right? Now, these aren't monumental type of workarounds, but if there's a will, there's a way, right? And so even though we've overlaid all this technology with electronic logs, that has been beneficial. It has helped with safety and compliance and regulation, which is very important in the full truckload industry, in any industry in our industry in general, I should say. But here's the two things that are popping up, Pete, and I want to get these right. So I'm going to look down here. So one is called personal conveyance, and the other one is called yard movements. So here's what personal conveyance is. And I'm just going to give you some examples rather than try to explain, give some definition. But if you're commuting from your home to the driver's terminal, that's considered personal conveyance. Commuting from to a work site where you may be going there, traveling to a rest location after loading or unloading, right? So it's the end of the day, you've met your hours of service and you're going to drive somewhere to park for the night. And then moving a vehicle when requested by safety or safety requirements, right? So those are very small increments of time, but people are kind of falsifying the logs and using those small increments of time to go a few extra miles on their routes for the pickup and delivery in their transit. And so they're discovering that, hey, you're saying that you were driving to and from work, but you live 500 miles away and you've added this on your log, which then exempts them from some of the rules and the hours of service. So the other one is yard moves, right? So if you're operating a vehicle within a large drop yard or a large warehouse and you're just physically in a small space, and they can track the speed at which you're moving. And I think it's, under 20 miles an hour or something like that. But it does count towards a driver's on-duty, non-driving time. So there's a lot of nuances with this, Pete. But the bottom line is that these are two loopholes that are not clearly defined, that people are now taking advantage of to try to get that extra mile, so to speak, to keep it on moving down the road. So, hey, I get it. It may not be that big of a deal when you look on it from paper, but the trucking industry needs to be safe and compliant. And I think the FMCSA has done an excellent job of understanding the rules and being fair within drivers as we go along. But it caught my attention. Hey, when there's a way to push an inch or grab not grab a mile, but grab a little bit of time, it's happening. And it's starting to get noticed and documented and discussed.
Well, Doug, you said where there's a will, there's a way. And I'm going to quote the brilliant poets from the late 1980s, early 90s hair band, Faster Pussycat, when I say where there's a whip, there's a way. If there is some type of negative outcome financially for a company, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's logistics or manufacturing or service. They're going to find a way to try to manage the risk, manage the liability, and manage the possible loss. And if the rules have been written in such a way that they're incomplete, we can't be too upset about it that the rule doesn't actually speak to the problem. Where we can get upset is if legislators don't find a way to tighten up that loophole and make it actually do what the spirit of the rule is supposed to do. So, I understand, all of us have pushed 55, I'm sure, on the highway and done something here and there that was within the spirit of the rules, but not the rule itself. But now it's really up to legislators to find a way to correct that gaping hole in their regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we'll see how fast they act. If they act swiftly, then it is a true concern. If they just don't define the ambiguity, then that'll speak to the level of concern with that loophole, those
Agreed,
two
buddy.
loopholes. So.
Before we go to halftime, can I bring up a fifth topic for us to talk about?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we chatted about this earlier today, but a report came out today that the Port of Baltimore, so you can say the state of Maryland, is going to be pursuing the ship owners of the ship that crashed into the Key Bridge. And they're saying that it's the ship owner's fault for putting a non-seaworthy vessel out to sea. And because of that, putting these folks in a situation where the port is essentially still closed or crawled to a halt. And, you and I have talked a lot about what the possible outcome will be. I'll let you keep your thunder on that one, but it's starting to happen, man. It's starting to be everything from general average being claimed, right? Force majeure being claimed. Now they're going to go after the FBI is investigating everything because of criminal activity. Nobody wants to end up holding the flaming bag of crap on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Every steamship line and every port out there is like double, triple, quadruple check. If there's any doubt in your mind whatsoever, do not move this vessel.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it'll create delays or not, but it's just too bad, right? I mean, I get it. Somebody has to be blamed for this. We've talked about that in the past. And simply like it was an accident is not acceptable in this day and age. That comment is relevant to everything in life, right? You have an accident and that's it. So anyway, it's inevitable that this was going to happen.
Yeah. I forget how you pointed it out. You're like, someone's going to take the blame for this. Someone's going to end up being the one who's blamed for all of this. And everybody knows that. So whatever they can do to limit the cash out of the bank account once the blame gets passed around, these cats are going to do it.
Yep. So cool. All right. We got halftime, buddy. This is a great part of the show. It's brought to us by Cap Logistics. We appreciate them every week giving us this soapbox and facilitating our muses to the general public. So this is the fun part. What do you got? What do you got this week?
Yeah, I'm going feel good this week, Doug. So I got two feel good stories. One's a little more specific than another. A gentleman named Cam Boozer, which is maybe one of the best baseball names ever, got to make his debut last week at the age of 31. He was drafted and played for the Twins for a little while, but all the way through high school, all the way through college when he was at Oregon, and then in the minor leagues, he was plagued by really bad injuries. And he had a lot of things personally to him that happened. Hardships that happened throughout his whole career, financial hardships, personal hardships, but he never quit. And at 31, he's finally made his major league debut playing for the Red Sox, and he actually got a couple outs. So don't give up on your dreams, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with that one. And then the second one is, speaking of dreams, I talked about it last year. I've probably talked about it every year. This week to me is one of my favorite weeks in all of sport, buddy. It's the NFL draft, where not only do we get to see some of the worst fashions that young men wear in America. I don't know what these guys are thinking. But we also get to see people's dreams come true. You and I played sports when we were kids. I played sports in college. I'm pretty sure you did too. And even now, when you're out there doing whatever it is physically, you have ideas in your head of making the Olympics or whatever. Very few of us ever do. So to get to watch television and see some young man go up on the podium and, hopefully have his family with him and get to really enjoy that moment where his dream has come true. And it's really the first step in the next processes of that dream. May not go where he wants it to go, but he made the show. And I absolutely love the NFL draft, Doug.
Nice. Yeah, it's a fun time. And the NFL's done a great job in the last couple of years to really hype it up and make it a true event. I think it's in Detroit this year. So that should be interesting.
Yeah.
Good,
all right, Doug, what do you got, bud? What's your halftime?
All right, I'm super stoked about this one because one of our listeners sent me a message on LinkedIn after our last show and said, hey, this could be an excellent topic for halftime. And so I did some research. So Dan Peterson works for Kintetsu up in Toronto. He's an avid listener, and I just want to say thanks. If anybody has any topic suggestions, please reach out to us, whether it's halftime banter or whether it's topics to discuss. But Dan, super cool. I appreciate you sending this our way. So anyway, you may remember this, Pete. This started way back in April of 23, where there was a gold heist in Canada. $22.5 million of gold bars were stolen. Did you hear about that?
I heard about it when it was on the news last week. I didn't hear about it originally.
Yeah. So here's the original, and there's some videos out there, and maybe I'll put a link on this one so people can read it. It's about a 9-minute summary of it. But here's the gist. There was 6,600 gold bars that were moving from Switzerland they flew into Toronto to a bank via Air Canada, and Brinks was supposed to pick it up. Well, after it landed, 45 minutes later, a box truck shows up and says, "Hey, I have a shipment to pick up for seafood." Well, that seafood was picked up the day before. The guys on the Air Canada dock rolled out this container of gold, gave it to them. And the truck left Toronto, went to the boonies, and apparently they melted all the gold down and turned it into other things, bracelets and things of that nature. And so they've been doing all this work and research and investigations. And they finally broke the case because the driver of that van back in April of 23 was pulled over in Pennsylvania because he was driving another van that was a little bit shady and needed, the cops pulled him over. There was like 65 guns in there. Some of them had serial numbers moved off, and they think that he was trying to smuggle them into Canada. And so that's where everything unraveled, and it was a total of 9 people involved. It was an inside job, so there were 2 people from Air Canada. And the crazy thing, Pete, is they still do not know where the gold is. And they pretty much said, as soon as this stuff gets melted down and turns into other forms, there is no gold DNA. It just disappears. And so it has just been absorbed into the world. They think it was, not necessarily the mafia, but organized crime and everything else. So, like you said, it popped up last week, and that's when Dan shot it over to us. But kind of cool story. I don't know if they're going to make a movie out of it or what. But anyway, I'm glad that Dan sent it to us. Thank you, sir. And interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. I love heists, Doug. I don't know why they get my attention like they do. Maybe it's because I lack the creativity and mental acuity to ever do anything that sinister, But whether it's the great train bank robbery that happened in the UK or, the Swiss Air theft that happened, that was real. They talked about it in Goodfellas. Yeah, they blow me away. And this one in particular, it's like, what were you going to do with that much gold? Swim in it like Scrooge McDuck? Like, what are you going to do with that much gold? It just seems like they were smart enough to figure out how to steal it, but they probably weren't smart enough to figure out how to get the rest of it. So I'll be fascinated to see in the coming years how much of it they actually find. And I'm sure, Doug, I'm sure they'll find a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, if they turn it into bracelets and it's all over the world, I don't know if they will. I mean, one of the cops specifically said there is no DNA with gold. They melt it down and turn it into other things. It's gone. It's been absorbed into the world and everything.
Somebody's going to flip, Doug. Someone's going to flip. Someone's going to say, I turned them into bracelets and I sold them to this guy and that guy sold it to this guy. And that's too much money, man. And of course it was an inside job. No kidding, really. Like, I mean,
I'm here to pick up seafood. Oh, by the way, throw $22 million worth of gold in the back of my truck.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Yeah. This smells like squid. Sure. Let's put it in there for him. No problem.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right. So that's halftime, brought to us by Cap Logistics. Please check them out at caplogistics.com. We're flipping to the second half of the program. So what's your next topic, Pete?
Inflation. So enough of my feel-good topics. Let's get back to something miserable. If you are alive and buy anything, you've been feeling the crunch of the loss of the value of what you make for what you buy. And it seems that, that dollar is just not stretching as far anymore. Well, the Fed didn't expect it to take this long. And they came out last week and they were very clear. They're just not ready to do any more downward pressure on the interest rates, which I believe I'd said when we did our predictions. The scary thing is we're kind of running out of stuff we can do to deal with this. The economy is going too well. Too many people are employed. Oh, heavens, how terrible is all this, right? Too many people are employed. And the U.S. export economy and what we're doing as businesses is going too well. So how do they fight inflation, right? You've heard about certain people running for president who've talked about just lopping off a zero from the debt or something ridiculous like that. There's always minting the coin, which we've talked about, right? But that would probably just increase inflation. So what are they going to do about it? Well, the bad news is, Doug, there's not a lot they can do. And this inflation is going to be sticking around for quite some time until there's a major change to the way that America's, economic undertones are going. So nothing but bad news probably for the next couple of quarters. And that's going to mean a continued slowdown in the American house selling market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when Jay Powell kept raising them, he kind of controlled it. But you're right, like the consumption, the purchasing of the average American, and maybe I'm naive on this, Pete, but the signs that I see all around, there are 4 houses in my neighborhood that I live in, all sold within 1 week.
Wow.
I'm not even kidding. Like people, and this is the time to sell your home, right? Your kids get out of school and you move in the summer and all that kind of stuff. But, a 7% interest rate on a home loan doesn't seem to be turning anybody. And people are still exporting and people are importing and people are consuming. So you're right. I had not thought about that. Like, what are the other levers to be pulled to help control things? I don't know. It's a good point.
Not much left, pal. There's not much left. So I think we're going to be having a pretty sticky inflation here for a little while. And that's not a good thing for those of us wanting to buy a house. So,
yeah,
like me.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, my last topic is China related, right? Shocker. We talk about that country quite a bit. But I heard a term the other day called China Shock 2.0, right? You got to have a big headline to draw people in, and that's certainly what it did for me. And before I tell you what China Shock 2.0 is, I'll tell you what China Shock 1.0 was. And they're saying it went back to 1978 when China started opening up markets and allowing private enterprise to come in. The industrialization of China, turning into the world's factory, kind of what we've seen over the last several decades, right? With China being, the epicenter of the world when it's related to manufacturing. That's been slipping. That's not the point of this topic. We've talked about how people are nearshoring and looking for alternatives. But that's 1.0. 2.0 is what writers have referred to as the big 3: electric vehicles, solar cells, and lithium batteries. And we've seen that with the EV auto industry in China taking over. I think there's I can't remember the name of the company, Pete, but it's the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturers in China. What's that?
Yeah, we talked about them on the show.
Yeah. So they're basically saying that, hey, this could be the next big thing, right? And I know EVs have slowed down a little bit here in the U.S., but this is a global market, right? And so EVs, solar, lithium batteries, and ion batteries, that's kind of the big 3 that they're referring to. So there's a little bit of worry about flooding the world market with these. We've seen that a little bit with solar panels, right? And some of the tariffs that are queued up ready for that, along with the steel and the aluminum. But yeah, everybody's saying, hey, now we're aware of it. We really weren't aware of 1.0 and its potential impacts, short-term and long-term. Now we're aware of China Shock 2.0, and we won't let this happen again. The fact that it's 3 specific big verticals, I think it will not be so impactful, but everybody is aware and they don't want to duplicate history with China being the epicenter of that. But who knows? EV, everybody wants it. Solar, that's still a big deal. And then lithium batteries, obviously, are huge for everything that you and I are doing. So I don't know. Have you heard China Shock 2.0? Have you heard anything about this?
I haven't heard it called that. I know that those were 3 industries that China intended to have a really tight grasp on as they began to reinvent their economy. But, lithium batteries, yes, I see that as just, inescapable. And they have all the tools and the science to make it. EVs are not having the renaissance that people expected them to have. So I think that there's still an opportunity, at least for other nations, to overcome them. But solar is one I don't really understand how China is going to continue to manage to manipulate. President Biden for Earth Day came out and, that his big speech said, we're going to do a $7 billion grant for solar in America. And, I read that and it was like, cool. I dig on solar. I think it's pretty awesome. But then my next thought to myself was, aren't all those solar panels going to come from China? And how much of this technology that we're talking about was basically just an export grant to people that were having a hard time right now with trade? And was that part of it? Was that sort of a quiet deal to maybe lessen tensions between the 2 countries? I don't know. But all of those 3 things you just talked about, solar, lithium batteries, which a lot of people are into because of the reusableness of them, and then EVs, they're all an important part of greening the economy. But two of them really have not had the launch that I expected them to. And some of that technology really hasn't changed in so long. They're running out of people to adapt them. So I'm not quite sure that it's going to be as fruitful an enterprise as our friends in China thought.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it. Two of the three, at least in America, are kind of on the downward, not a slide, but they're on the downward side of the hill. But it is a global market they're targeting. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, two of the three here in the U.S. losing a little momentum.
Yeah. And technology, early adopters, and then something really has to change to get people to truly embrace it. And for two of those things, they're actually having a hard time getting it. But I guess time will tell, Doug. So that's all of our topics. You got a bonus topic this week, everybody. Happy Earth Day. It's always a pleasure to have you with me, Doug. Keenan back in the booth doing his voodoo and witchcraft to make this thing work. And our great friends at Cap Logistics who always find a way to support us so that we can keep our old man blatherings coming at you every single week. But thanks a lot, Doug. As always, great job, great topics. If it's happening in global trade, we'll talk about it next week in Global Trade This Week. See you, everybody.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete.